First and foremost, I want to say a big thank you to every single person that has actually turned up today.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a big round of applause for yourselves actually coming. It's great to see all of you here. What I will say at the start is, welcome to the big debate. The first and foremost, the big elephant in the room is, where is the Christian Union? And the answer is that they pulled out on Thursday. So, but we're still going ahead because the show must go on, right?
Yeah.
Because we're
they were hiding underneath the platform.
There's some cloud somewhere, but yeah, anyways.
It's gunpowder.
So, welcome to the big debate. Hello.
Why did they pull out?
Why did they pull out?
Yeah.
Fear.
Fear.
They had some issues with their seat.
That too. Unfortunate trip to somewhere. Anyways. So yeah, so they're not here, unfortunately, but we are. I want to introduce our chairman, Victor, the president of the Students' Union, who's amazingly agreed to chair this debate. I also want to introduce Khader, the ISOC president on the right hand side, Abdullah Andalusia, the co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative. To my right, Andrew Copson, the CEO of the British Humanist Association and the first vice president of the International Humanist and Ethical Union, and my name is Harry, and I'm the AHS president. First and foremost, I want to hand over to Karen Healy on my right hand side, who's going to briefly talk about giving blood.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Cool. I'm just here today to register any of you that are interested in giving blood or to answer any questions about giving blood. Every day in this country we need 7,000 units of blood to supply local hospitals, or to supply hospitals all over the country. But only 4% of the population actually give blood. 96% of the population are relying on that 4% to give blood. And every year the numbers keep dropping because we're not getting enough young people signing up to give blood. So here's your perfect opportunity. All it takes is a couple of minutes for you to pop down your name, address, date of birth.
Thank you for that, Harry. I'd like to invite everyone once again for this event today. You can see I'm very nervous. I've never done anything like this before. Yeah. I've just got a few things to say before we start. We all know we're here for a debate, and I would just want everyone to respect every other person's opinion, even if it's against what you believe. And I don't want people throwing chairs at each other. Yeah, I just keep it professional, just keep it simple, and we're just here to like listen to what that person has to say and just rub minds together as well. And it's an open debate, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and feel free to express your views and just have fun as well. Yeah, we've got 4 topics to talk about today, and I'm gonna go through each of them today and give guys on my right hand side and left hand side to say something as well. The first one is women's rights, and the question is it right for women to hold leadership positions within a place of worship and within a community? I'll start with ISOC, and let's speak for 5 minutes to speak, after which the president has got 2 minutes to speak. If you've got any questions, you can ask when they finish speaking as well. I'll only take 2 questions per topic, and at the end of the event, we can take other questions that you've got. Is that okay? Okay, you guys are online, please. Is that okay? Yeah, good, thank you.
Sweet.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu wassalamu ala Nabi Muhammad wa alihi tayyibin wa sahbihi salihin. I greet you all with the Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessing of God be upon you. Right, well, it's a very interesting discussion today with these 4 points. I wanted to thank the Student Union for hosting the event and the AHS for coming. My colleague Andrew Copson, always a pleasure. and we'll get straight into it, really. Now, I want to put two caveats, very quick caveats, to a lot of this discussion. Some of this discussion is about, which will be presented from different religious perspectives. In Islamic law is not obliged upon non-Muslims, and by dint of that, Islamic law is not obliged upon UK. So this discussion is in some way just to explain what Islam considers its position on these matters, or some of these matters, but it does not mean that we are advocating for the UK to be transformed into a caliphate, or that non-Muslims should be upon this. In fact, Islam embraced plurality, whereby Jews, Christians and others had their own law system, which was suited to their own beliefs and faith. We didn't impose the Sharia on others and on non-Muslims. So just to make that very clear, now just to maybe discuss the Islamic perspective to women and leadership positions. Now, in Islam, women can be leaders in many fields and have authority. They can be CEOs, judges, patrons, teachers, theologians, Islamic jurisprudence and transmitters of tradition, and Islamic scholars. And history bears testimony to that. They can be in positions of authority or influence over males or females. We don't really have any concept whereby the female is denied authority if it means that she has authority over a male, and many such females in the past, many such women in Islamic history have had such authority. Islam doesn't have a clergy or a clerical organization, so we don't have issues with women priests, bishops and cardinals, because we don't have priests, bishops and cardinals in the first place. Any person can ascribe to any position within the Islamic civilization. Furthermore, women can be elected representatives in what we call a shura council or a parliament, I suppose it will be one translation, and they can be political secretaries and consuls to the leaders. Now, what we see from history is that many European travelers into the Islamic civilization noted the very elevated and lofty status that women were given in the Islamic civilization. For example, Lady Elizabeth Craven, in her book A Journey Through the Crimea to Constantinople in 1789, said about the society, as to women, as many, if not more than men, are to be seen in the streets, going about their daily activities. I think I never saw a country where women may enjoy so much liberty and free from all reproach as in Turkey. The Turks, in their conduct towards our sex, are an example to all nations, and I repeat it, sir, I think no women have so much liberty, safe from apprehension, as the Turkish. I think them in their manner of living, capable of being the happiest creatures breathing. We also see that Salman Schweiger, I think is the pronunciation, German Protestant minister, he went to the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century and he made this observation, Ottoman Caliphate rather. Turks rule countries, but their wives rule them. Turkish women go around and enjoy themselves much more than any others. Polygamy is absent. They must have tried it, but given it up because it led to too much trouble and expense. Interesting observation. So women never had this kind of inferior position whereby they couldn't be clergy, we don't have clergy, but they couldn't be scholars, they couldn't be thinkers, and they couldn't be philosophers in the Islamic civilization. Islam does not consider women as inferior to men in the capacity to reason, think, and come to intellectual conclusions. And there's no innate theological problem with women being a ruler. We see in the Quran, it says that the Queen of Sheba was praised in the Quran for being a very wise and just leader. However, political leadership of the Muslim community, the caliph role, is not a right upon anyone. No one has a right to be the caliph. In how we view the concept of power is, no one has the right to have the top position of power. People are nominated by popular consultation and selected to accept it, removing them from their lives, which they must sacrifice in order to fulfill the very heavy commitment of this role. It is considered in Islam to be one of the most burdensome and theological grave and risky position, because the caliph is accountable for every small act of injustice which occurs under their administration. And the consequences could be very grave in the afterlife. There is no privilege to this position, no salary and no aggrandizement, and the ruler must consult with others in discharging his office and has no choice in implementing the Islamic laws. The caliph is the commander-in-chief of the army, and the role of the caliph is considered one that provides for military defense of the people. It's very similar to the Roman concept of the magister populi in this regard. But in this particular role, Islam exempts women from the burden of being subject to be called up and taken away from their lives in order to serve their community in such a capacity. This is not as a result of any inferior capacity of women, but rather it is just an exemption, because this position is not a privilege. There's no privilege in this position. It's considered to be a very hefty burden. And even in Western culture, there's a concept of exempting women from heavy burden. You don't see people campaigning for 50% female quotas to minors, for example, or soldiers. Why don't you see that? Why don't you see feminists come out and say we must have 50% quota for people who are explosive disposal experts? Why don't you see that? It's because even amongst feminists there's this tacit acceptance that basically we should exempt women from such a role. And we can get into a discussion as to why. I know that perhaps my opponent will. Sorry?
1 minute.
Okay. I know that perhaps the opposition will say, isn't that some kind of discrimination and discrimination or inequality? It would be discrimination if it was. It would be against men, not against women, because the caliph role is not a privileged position. You don't get perks out of it. It's actually a very kind of sacrificial role. You sacrifice your life, in essence, to serve the wider community. But we can go into and discuss where do we get the concept of equality from, and are humans subject to uniformity? Are we something that we must be completely uniform? We must ignore any kind of understanding of biology? We can discuss that. But suffice to say, women are not precluded from positions of power and authority within Islam. But the issue of the only position, caliph, is not a right on anyone to have. No one can nominate themselves for it. It must be given to somebody, and the person who's given it, knowing the full consequences, will not be happy to receive it. And it's meant to be a position where you lament receiving it, and then actually rejoice, as you see many American presidents might be happy when they win their elections. So that's the Islamic position on the issue of authority.
Thank you very much. And we didn't have You've got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. To basically sum up the point, because that's what I could do for 2 minutes, is that just reiterate what he said about Islam and women's leadership positions in the community. So first of all, they could be anything they literally want, especially very good like educators, mothers, leaders of the community themselves. A lot of men do listen to what the wives say, especially at home. Furthermore, women can be elected for representative seats, so we've seen this in like a number of countries such as Turkey, Iran. Even Iran has like women elected to their position. And furthermore, there's a capacity for like women to incite their own scholarship ideas. So we wouldn't have a university, we wouldn't be in this place without a woman. Islam created the first university, and the person who created the first university was a woman. And then the Western civilization took that and then copied it from the rest of Europe. Yeah, and that's all I've got to say about that.
Thank you very much. I'll pass you on over now to the next thing. And you've got 5 minutes.
No. Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you very much. I think that before I get onto the direct topic of sex equality, I'm going to just spend a few seconds, maybe a minute, explaining a humanist approach to moral questions. Obviously, one of the things that we're doing this evening is looking at 4 questions of ethics, moral questions, and so I want to just explain very briefly the sort of direction from which a humanist approach comes when looking at ethical questions in general. So obviously, a humanist approach is one that doesn't believe in the existence of any external arbiter of human affairs. So the belief is that moral questions are questions that are to be sorted out in the here and now, that ethics is a human endeavour, that it's something, the collective reference point for which is to be found in our common human experience rather than outside of humanity. Now, obviously, because of that, there are many different humanist perspectives on individual moral questions. But what they have in common is that they're all approaches that seek to make the most of human welfare and human fulfilment and human potential, and by that meaning the potential and welfare of every human person. So the desire would be to see every person in this world, including people in future generations as yet unborn, be able to develop to the maximum of their capacity and potential and ability in this life, which humanists believe, of course, is the only life we have. So when looked at in that way, the question of what is right and wrong becomes a question of what sort of behaviour, what sort of choices, what sort of actions will bring about the greatest increase in human welfare and fulfilment in the particular context that you're asking the question in, whilst at the same time avoiding harm and avoiding suffering and making sure that the basic rights of every person are protected. That involves obviously thinking very hard about the consequences of each action, trying to understand from the best research available what the likely consequences of actions are, what the current field of discipline is in areas like biology or physics or political science, so that you can really understand, having taken all the possible factors into account, what the decision that will have the greatest possible beneficial impact will be and what sort of bad decisions should be avoided. So when it comes to, so that's the humanist approach to moral reasoning. When it comes then to the specific question of sex equality, the answer from a humanist perspective is very simple. If we're concerned with maximising the welfare and fulfilment of each individual person, if we're concerned with making sure that every person has the means and the ability and the opportunity to live up to their potential, then there is absolutely no way that from the beginning of any question we can justify the exclusion from any opportunity of basically 50% of the world's population. So I don't think that there is any question at all that women or men should ever be denied automatically access to any service or opportunity or position or good in this world. You can go in great depth into the sort of evidence that you might look at to try and justify differential or discriminatory treatment. In the past, discriminatory treatment of women has often been justified by reference to biology. Oh, it's terrible, women are unfortunately incapable by their different biology of taking this decision or that decision. The word hysteria, the origin of the word hysteria, you know, the idea that you go into a flat and can't make a decision. The origin of the word hysteria comes from the Greek for womb. And the idea was that women's wombs go wandering around their bodies and press against their brains, and unfortunately they become overheated and incapable as a result of making any sort of sensible decision. And totally false claims about biology like that have pervaded the history of human societies wherever men have sought to exert political power over women. So too have false claims that it's not that we don't trust you to wield power, it's just that power is a terrible burden. It really is great suffering, there's no gain in it, it's a great responsibility. And in fact, by excluding you from this sort of responsibility or power, we're not persecuting or discriminating against you, we're just saving you, it's for your own good. The paternalistic approach that says it's for your own good, that denies women the chance to decide what is good for them and have full choice and opportunities. There's no point from a humanist point of view in limiting equality to women or men. I think, as I say, there should be equal access to all roles, all perks, and also equal access to all opportunities for sacrifice and to give up a part of your own good for the good of other people. It's up to each individual person, whether woman or man, to decide what burden they're capable of taking up for the common good. To treat people as if they're unable or unworthy to take up that position is to treat them as children and inferior, and that's not something that I would ever support.
You've got 2 minutes. Thank you. So I've got to follow that. Amazingly spoken. It begs the question how the ideas of the past, the ideas that were bound by the men who wrote these paternalistic texts in order to argue how people should live their lives, supposedly due to God-given will, and how to control these people, how to control women especially, through oppression, through means of control, and how they've slowly trickled through generations and generations, and how they've stagnantly still, well, they're still there, they still survive. For example, when you have roles whereby women, we don't want to burden them with that. Oh, why not? Surely we've moved on from those prehistoric versions of what women and what men can do. We are human beings. We are the beautiful gift of an evolutionary history which should be, in all honesty, should be celebrated because of that. It is demeaning, it is insulting, and it is not very nice, should we say, to continue to argue this rhetoric of segregating the two different genders. By doing so, all we are doing is stagnating this view further. By doing that, what we are also doing, if you really think about it, is developing this within our mind that this is the way it is. So, for example, if we see women as this vulnerable, susceptible human being which can't control their emotions or whatsoever, how dare we, how do we allow them to take on such roles within society? They're not fit enough to do that. Surely we've come further away from those views and those beliefs, and probably we haven't, unfortunately. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give the guest speakers 3 minutes each to argue what each person has said. Who would like to go first?
I think it's me. Okay. I think they might be addressing some points which are perhaps kind of Eurocentric issues with maybe how women were treated in the West throughout history. But in Islam, women aren't treated as inferior or children, or they're unable to do things, or that they are exempt from the caliph role for their own good. There's no narrative or discourse of that in Islam. Rather, Islam really just recognizes something, which is that humans are not uniform, and that human beings all are specialized. We have specializations, and we have certain proclivities, human nature, and so on and so forth. Now, it doesn't mean that women are denied opportunities for sacrifice. Many women just being good mothers it's a daily sacrifice that they have to go through, and I don't think I could cope with what I've seen my mother go through, not because of me, of course, but just trying to be a good mother, or even women who go out and be good scientists, and even women who join the army, which Islam permits. Women can join the army, and they've sacrificed their life in the just causes. So Islam doesn't prohibit these things, and we shouldn't perhaps project a very Eurocentric history onto the Islamic civilization, which they're probably not doing, but they probably wrote their presentation in anticipating perhaps another opponent, probably. However, Islam believes that we're not just individuals, that we are social creatures, that we have different specializations. If aliens came to Earth and they studied humans, they would have seen, what's these two types of humans? A man seems to be a modified female, as Lewis Wolpert, a biologist, mentioned in his book, Why Can't a Woman Be More Like a Man? The Evolution of Sex and Gender. Right? So evolutionary biologists have concluded that there are basic proclivities, and there are differences, that men have more testosterone, they're more, that this has certain effects, which you can see by differential of numbers between prison statistics, more men in prison than within women, and then a number of other things they notice with developmental stages of a child. Now, all Islam says is, it doesn't say that, women can't do it, and they must be prohibited from doing stuff. No, it doesn't say that. Women can participate, and have participated in ruling, in advising the caliph, being the caliph's advisors to Caliph Umar, one of the companions of Prophet Muhammad. He had a woman as his advisor, and there were women street judges, not like Judge Dredd, but street judges. We have a concept of going out and administering justice in marketplaces and so on. Women can do that. That's not a problem. The issue is that the caliph idea is more of an extrapolation of the men's role, which Islam defines, which men ought to be specialized to, which is defense and protection of the community, which might require physical defense and protection. And Islam just apportions that to men as part of a higher narrative. Now, if you are an individualist and you want to believe that there are no higher narratives for human beings, then that's fine. We can ignore biology, and you can say, let's just make up the rules for humans as if biology, evolution, or whatever belief you want to believe in had played no part and has no effect. We're just disembodied intellects that float around and can be put in any particular situation we want to, absent of any context that we emerged from. So all Islam is, it's not saying women can't do stuff, it's rather saying that there are certain specializations within the human species, and Islam encourages humans to play up to certain proclivities. It doesn't say that women are incapable or unintelligent. As I said, the Queen of Sheba is praised in the Quran as being a wise and just leader. If Islam was against women ruling, it wouldn't have praised the Queen of Sheba in the Quran. So we just have to avoid strawmanning traditions because maybe Europe had a very bad past with how it treats women, doesn't mean that every other civilization has the same perspective or even the same worldview.
Thank you very much.
Well, I don't really mind what the history of Europe is, nor what the history of the Ottoman Empire is. I mean, nothing that I said was about that, so there's nothing really for me to respond to. I was talking about a humanist approach to equality between men and women now, and what I said applies as much to the notion of a job of a caliph in its political sense as to any other, but I don't particularly mind whether that post is restricted to men or women or not, since neither myself nor anyone I know is ever likely to occupy that post. It's obviously a matter for people who care about that sort of thing, which I don't. I agree that humanists are not uniform. Humans, sorry, did I say humanists? Yeah. Humans, I mean, they're not uniform either. But human beings certainly aren't. I agree that humans aren't uniform. I think that everyone has different talents and capacities and abilities. But I do deny that the principal dividing line between categories of people is men and women. I think that all the evidence of psychology, for example, if you look at something like the evidence of current research into intelligence, shows that there is very little that correlates to gender in the world of intelligence. Men and women are not so different as centuries of attempted social differentiation between the two has made out. Now, of course, there are physical differences that are very obvious in the right circumstances between men and women, and obviously those differences have a biological function, but I'm sure we've moved beyond the point at which biology dictates our whole society. I mean, biology is no longer the foundation of the civilization that we live in. If it were, then half of us would be dead, for a start, because we would never have cured ourselves in infancy through medicine or other technologies of the diseases that would have killed us off. So I really think that the whole question of sex or gender differentiation is, to me, an extremely unimportant one. I really don't think that there are any rules at all or positions at all, as I said a moment ago, that should be disbarred to one gender or one sex or another. Apart from that, there's nothing really in what was said just now for me to argue against, because to some extent, of course, we just take a fundamentally diametrically different sort of position.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to open it up to the audience now if anyone's got any questions. Don't be shy. I've got someone up there. I'm looking for two hands. I'm going to go one.
Any women?
That's taught to be Muslim, you have to accept that it's a revelation from God and there is wisdom behind everything that He tells us to do. And as Muslims, our ultimate goal is to become closer to Allah, one God and our word. And we're given those opportunities to do this. And just because those opportunities are a little bit different sometimes. And yeah, you want to talk about inequality. The only inequality is that men don't get as much advantage as women do. Because actually it's a mercy for women not to take on the Khilafah role. If I'm thinking about, and another thing, you speak a lot for the Muslim women, and you say, well, we don't think it's fair. Well, actually, if you ask us, we're all right. Does anyone want to be Khilafah when it comes to women? No.
I didn't say anything about Muslim women at all. I didn't say anything about Muslim women at all. I mean, I understand your point of view entirely, and that's entirely your choice.
I think just to kind of reiterate, the role of Caliph is an imposed role, as in the person who receives it didn't ask for it and can't say, I want it. If in fact they do, they disqualify themselves, but it's imposed. They are selected in one way, almost against their will. They are selected to do it. So it's an imposed role, not a role whereby you say, I want it and I want access to it, and then you get it. I think also there's another point. I think it was just very interesting is it's correct what Andrew Copson says, that we have some different kind of worldviews here. So maybe humanists have a more individualistic perspective on the matter, whereby humans are treated as just individuals whose concerns are purely material in the material world. Or at least not beholden to a high narrative. Whereas in Islam, all humans are beholden to a high narrative greater than ourselves, and which defines our roles in life, gives us purpose. That's the practical difference is we are given purpose, and so we have many attributes about us. So if you're a person of great intellect, then maybe your role in life is to do something which uses your intellect. And if you're a person of great strength, maybe your role, if you see you could do it, is something that involves manual labor or something like this. However, when it comes to the differences in gender, Islam gives specializations which allow both to integrate and complement each other for a greater, higher purpose. It's not an inferiority of one or the other, it's symbiotic between the genders, and that's kind of how the Islamic approach is to that.
Thank you very much for that. I've asked someone there, if you write your questions down, you can ask at the end of the debate. I'm sorry. Do you want to ask a question?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Who's your question directed to?
Sorry?
Who's your question directed to? Is it just...
the Islamic Society. It took a while to get there, but eventually in your second speech, you finally defined why it was that women couldn't hold the role of Khalif. You said it was because it was more of a role of physical protection. But several times in your speech, you also referred to you being quite happy with them being soldiers. So I'm just wondering how the two match together, because surely if they can serve in an army and fight in war, then they'd be well suited to physical protection.
No, I didn't say that was the reason for the exemption for women. The exemption for women is as Muslims describe it, it's a mercy. They don't have to be in fear that they're going to be plucked from their lives against their will and be made to serve the community in a very, very harsh job role. But rather, I said that the position of Caliph is an extrapolation of the male role envisioned under the Islamic narrative of being the protector and the maintainer of that society. So it's an extrapolation. As I said, it's in a way it's very common to the Magister Populi in the Roman concept, whereby one person is, in times of war or something, one person is selected to be the defender of the entire community. It's similar in that respect, but it's more permanent. So it's an extrapolation of the narrative, but not that women can't be in warfare. And then even in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, women did involve themselves in military campaigns. They weren't denied. They weren't expected to. Men are expected by obligation to be reservists and to defend society and be enlisted. But women, it's not obligatory for them to do. But in Islam, we don't prohibit them from volunteering to join the army. So I'm not saying that women are prevented from being a caliph because they can't, hold a gun and go outside and be like Rambo, right? But we're saying that in a way the caliph's role is an extrapolation of the male the male role within society, whereby the males are, you could say, the soldier ants of the society, and the women are the queens, for want of a better analogy. So that's really what it is. It's just rather an extrapolation of a narrative. But Islam provides a purpose and narrative for the different gender roles. Of course, if you're from an individualistic perspective or humanistic perspective that Andrew follows, then maybe you don't believe in such narratives, and maybe you believe that I said we could just be disembodied intellects without much effect of our biology. If that's your belief, that's fine. But this is only for Muslims who believe in a higher narrative. As I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, this is not for non-Muslims, and it's certainly not advocated for UK because it's majority non-Muslim country. So it's only for those who believe in that narrative, and that's how it works out for those who adhere to the basis for that narrative.
Thank you very much for that. If anyone has got any question, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, I'm already injured, man.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
My question was to
you
Andrew.
Speak louder a bit.
Andrew and Harry.
it was posed to yourself. I was just saying something that quite baffled me is when you said you didn't care about the Khalifa position. I find that quite. I think you've shot yourself in the foot somehow, because it's a debate and you're talking about two different ideologies, and you're as a brother said that you're going via quite a Eurocentric narration in that you're kind of ignoring any other kind of civilization and you're focusing more on the European country.
In what way exactly?
Because you said that you didn't care, so how can you address an ideology when it is kind of, when it's established, its form in the government is that you have a Khalifa, but you haven't addressed that, so it tells me that you haven't done your research and you don't know about it. You said you didn't care.
Well, I mean, I've been asked to give a humanist perspective on equality between men and women.
Yeah,
So that's what I've been given.
By a Eurocentric.
I don't know what's Eurocentric about talking about equality between men and women based on biology and.
Narrating that you're saying that one of the excuses that is given is that, oh, you know, that you were going to try and save you. But that is actually the narrative in the European sense, and not in the Islamic civilization.
Okay, I understand your question. I think that the idea that the exemption of women from certain categories of duty is a mercy or is a benevolent act has come across in what's been said about the particular position of Khader. It's certainly also present in European civilization and in civilizations in most parts of the world. I mean, Mary Wollstonecraft in the late 18th century in England, when she wrote her Vindication of the Rights of Women, talked about this specific proposition. She talked about how men often, when they wish to reserve a certain power for themselves, will say things like, it's a mercy for you not to have to do it, you don't need to worry about this, and you're exempted from this great duty or burden. I think that's a common pattern. I mean, I find it all over the world and all over time. So I think that's the same sort of reasoning that has been heard there in defence of keeping a position of Khader, restricted only to men. But in fact, I mean, when I said I wasn't concerned about it, I think there is, I mean, obviously there are some of the values that I hold that I wish that everyone would adopt, of course. That's in part one of the reasons why they are my values. You know, I think they're good ones. And I think most people with strong values of one sort or another would desire those values to be shared. But I also recognise that when it comes to the self-organisation of certain groups or people for their own specific purposes, there are roles and responsibilities and jobs that they may wish to restrict to certain people based on different factors, one of which might be sex. And I think that in a situation where everyone involved has consented to that restriction, there is a case for saying that other people shouldn't interfere. And so that's what I mean by that I'm not particularly concerned about that position. Now, if I were to, you know, and that's why, for example, when sex equality laws were brought in the UK or in other parts of Europe, there were various exemptions from them for things like imams and priests and so on, saying that those jobs could be restricted to men in UK employment law, unless the groups involved decided they wanted to open those jobs up to women, which has happened, for example, today in the case of the Church of England. So that's my meaning when I say that it doesn't particularly concern me, that role. Of course, in a broader sense, I wish that everyone would embrace sort of full gender equality, but I think we have to recognise we live in a world where not everyone is going to agree with each other, and so I think sometimes we have to recognise that right to disagree and to organise in a different way. But I don't think that's a Eurocentric position at all. I'm rather confused by that charge. Nor do I think that human beings can exist as disembodied intellects, and we are very clearly embodied personalities, and that does restrict what we can and can't do. What I deny is the idea that the main dividing line between groups of people is gender.
Thank you very much for that. If anyone has got any more questions, there's some papers being passed around. If you just write your question down and you'll be able to ask at the end of it. Oh, okay.
In Islam, it is hard for women and Islamic people to go to mosques and pray, stuff like that. And I think when a woman is on a period, that's a really natural thing. So I'm just wondering, why does Islam discriminate against that?
Okay, well, so your question is, why does Islam prevent women from praying while they're on their period?
Or going into a mosque.
Okay, I mean the issue is it's about just ritual purity for ritual prayer. Women can make supplication wherever their state, and so can men, right? You can always make supplication. Christians only make supplication, right? No, Christianity doesn't have a ritualized prayer apart from that the once a week mass services, whereas for Muslims we have 5 times a day. During the time when women experience a period, they are exempted from doing the ritualized prayers as a mercy, because they might be feeling weak, they might be feeling a whole number of things, whatever the case might be, they're exempted from it, but at all times they can always make supplication to God. There is no restriction. It's not like, the channel is shut off between you and God while you're on your period. None of that. So it's only for the ritualistic prayers, the 5 times a day ritualistic prayers, they're exempt from doing that while they're on the period. Also, if a man is cut and bleeding, he can't pray while he's bleeding as well. So it's not the issue of women becoming intrinsically dirty. No, it's that blood itself negates what we call ritualistic purity, wudu, and so that has to be stopped before that person can pray. So it's not about just women. Man's blood invalidates a man's ritualistic purity too. So it's not about men and women. It's just about the state of someone to do a ritualized prayer. I think I would just like to just add one kind of interesting thing. We talked about from the humanist perspective, this perhaps would be a perspective that I would like to argue one particular point, the issue of equality. I would say that equality can't be justified without reference to a greater narrative of divine being which establishes equality. Because humans, as you said, humans aren't equal. But if humans aren't equal, and certainly in nature, nature doesn't care about animals being equal, then they're not the strongest might survive, but the ones who are more fittest to pass on their genes will be able to do so, and the ones who are not. Nature doesn't care about equality and making sure everything's equal. So then where did we get this concept of equality if nature doesn't care about equality? The only where we get it from is that in the eyes of God, as Muslims we believe, all humans are equal in the eyes of God. Your soul is fundamentally equal in the eyes of God. However, you might have been born in a rich family, you might have been born to wealth, you might have had intellect or great strength or better immune system or a whole number of the advantages you have in life which other people don't have. But of course, we say fundamentally equality is preserved in the hereafter, because the more blessings you receive in this life, the greater your accountability is in the next life, and the greater your responsibility with those blessings that you receive. So a poor person will have a much easier day on the day of judgment than a person who is rich, has been given a lot. So I would say that if you don't believe in a God, then the idea of equality is just a vestigial remnant from the Christian past, which liberals or humanists imported or kept preserved. They lack any basis to justify, except to say, well, I like this idea. Well, that's great you like it, but you can't justify it. Whereas I would argue that those that had a religious background, either Christianity or Islam, there is a basis to justify it, because in nature, nothing's equal. Nature doesn't care about equality, evolution doesn't care about equality, it doesn't exist. So how are we equal? I'd say in the eyes of God.
I realise there are 3 more questions on the agenda, and the chair has been cavalier with the running order so far, which I suspect might be his natural style, which is fine with me. But I think I would like to just respond to that point, if that's all right. There are 2 claims that have been made there. Firstly, that the idea of equality between human beings makes no sense if you don't have a divine guarantor of it, or a divine reference point. And the second claim seemed to be that actually, if you believe in life after death, that's a greater idea of equality, because people who've suffered in this life will be better off after, and people who haven't will be worse off after. They seem to be the 2 claims. But to take the first one, the idea that equality only makes sense if you have some sort of divine arbiter for it. Well, clearly there are societies across the world that have evolved theories of equality that have nothing at all to do with a monotheistic God. That if you look at the idea of equality before the law in ancient Athens, it was explicitly based on the idea of this being a contract between human beings with no divine intervention between it. Isonomia is the Greek word for it. There are clearly various other non-Christian, non-Jewish, non-Muslim, non-monotheistic ideas of equality. This isn't to say that any society has totally lived up ever to the idea of equality. Certainly even Christian and Jewish and Muslim ones haven't. But there are plenty of ideas of equality that have nothing to do with the idea of a divine guarantor of it. My own commitment to equality stems from my acknowledgement of myself as a human being, the fact that I see something similar to myself reflected back to me out of the faces of other men and women in this world, and my desire to be treated well, and my desire, therefore, and feeling of obligation to treat others well in that same sense. And in fact, there are good social arguments for equality too. The evidence of something like The Spirit Level, a great book written about social equality and inequality, shows that even the best off in societies are happier and healthier and have longer lifespans and better outcomes if the society is more equal than if it's more unequal. So equality, it can be a practical, pragmatic, deliberate, human-created here and now concept. It doesn't have to be referred to some sort of external concept. And to say that it does is to deny the reality of social history, and also to insult people who live their lives on the basis of that principle. The second idea, the idea that equality somehow makes more sense if you sort of smear it out over eternity, so that people who've suffered in this life can then benefit in the next life. Well, that may be true if you believe in an afterlife. I don't, so that doesn't work for me. But also, I question whether that is equality either. For example, it's not something great about you that you've been born poor and have suffered all your life. It's just a coincidence about your life. So I think it's questionable as to why you should therefore benefit forever from the circumstances of the short life that you've lived in the here and now, and vice versa, why you should if you're rich. That doesn't seem like equality to me. That seems like very discriminatory treatment based on a very short period of existence compared with eternity. But maybe you're going to think about animal rights now.
Thank you very much.
I'll clap myself for that.
Thanks to everyone that contributed to that topic. We're way behind time, and I'm going to stick to my timing for the next sessions now. The next topic is on animal rights, and the question is, are the ways in which animals are capable of food important? I'm going to start with AHS, and you've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I don't think this will take me the whole 5 minutes, and maybe we'll catch up with ourselves in time. And the question is whether or not the ways in which animals are killed for food is important. I don't have much difficulty in answering this question. I said at the beginning that one of the ways, one of the tests in which a humanist approach applies in order to find out whether something is right or wrong is the test of suffering. Now, obviously, the most obvious sort of suffering that we are aware of and can understand is human suffering. But increasingly, as we've learned more about the rest of the animal world, those animals to which we are related through biology and have, close familial bonds with through our evolutionary history, the more we see that other animals too are capable of what we recognise as suffering. This is extremely evident now that we know more about the brain chemistry and behaviour of other mammals. We can see what in human beings we would term fear in the behaviour of other animals other than ourselves. And even so long ago as the humanist philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century, a humanist way of thinking applied the test to the way of treating other animals. Not can they reason, this is a quote from Jeremy Bentham, not can they reason, but can they suffer. And I think that because other animals very clearly do show evidence of suffering, then we have a moral obligation to them to minimise the suffering so far as is possible. Now, many people would say that means that we should, in fact, not kill animals for food at all. There are many people to whom a vegetarian approach to life makes more sense given this reasoning, the fact that animals can suffer and the fact that we have an obligation to minimise suffering, or a desire to do so. There are other people who can't quite bring themselves to that conclusion and so are going to carry on eating meat, and those people will have a legitimate desire to want to minimise animal suffering in the process of meat production. I think both approaches are something to recommend, and clearly with the technological advances that we've made, we don't need to take in calories from meat in order to live. But equally, if we do want to do that, we're able to determine what ways of killing animals for meat will produce less suffering, and I think that we should do those experiments and take those paths.
Thank you.
You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah. Animal rights come before religion. Now, I made that statement because if you think about it, or please do, animal rights, we are social animals, we are human beings, we are part of the same animal kingdom, we are evolved. As Andrew rightly argued, we do have genetic biological links to these other animals, to these other beings. And the argument of sentience, the argument of suffering is completely significant when we talk about how animals are killed for food and whether that is important. So, Personally, as a vegetarian, obviously my ideas are going to be biased towards that, so I'll keep them to the side. If, for example, meat production will stay, which it will, it's not going to die out, that is an agreeable, I guess, fact. What I will say is that we have to ensure that the suffering for those animals are reduced as much as we can. And in order to do that, religion doesn't have to play a part. We are therefore... Oh, the TV's come on. We are therefore responsible. I know, right? Saying goodbye to the lamb going to slaughter. We are therefore responsible for reducing the amount of suffering in that animal's life. And I don't think there's anything else that we could possibly say. So yeah.
Islamic position for animals is certainly one of kindness and mercy. We see that animals are not allowed to be subject to unnecessary suffering. A work animal cannot be overburdened. For example, the Prophet Muhammad forbade anyone from putting too much load on top of a camel, on top of a donkey. In one case, some of the companions of Prophet Muhammad took some eggs from a nearby bird. The bird started following the eggs and was very distraught. The Prophet said, "What's made this bird distraught?" And he said, "Oh, we took some of the eggs." So we'll return it back to the bird, because basically this mother bird has attachment to eggs. You can't make her basically have this anxiousness by taking away her eggs. So in Islam, we have a concern for the well-being of animals, and that the animals should not suffer, and that's very much part and parcel of Islam. However, the issue of animal rights when it comes to eating, because we do eat some animals, basically as humans do in most cultures and societies, it does bring up an interesting question of equality, because obviously they suffer, we suffer, they experience the world, we experience the world. Could you not argue that they deserve equal rights to human beings because they have a similarity? Of course, someone might say, but they're not having the same intelligence as human beings. Okay, but if that's your logic, then would you say that those who are, let's say, not as intelligent as you, amongst other human beings, also deserve lesser rights by that same criteria? Does intelligence necessitate rights? So how do you justify equality from a material perspective? Even the ancient Greeks, which he cited, they didn't treat women and slaves equal to their males in ancient Greeks. And I think it was Aristotle, or could be Plato, I forget which, who said that identical things should be treated equally. But humans aren't identical. So how would you justify that? And also animals are not identical to human beings. So I think that was probably maybe a response to maybe your previous point, just to show that it's still not as clear-cut, because even the ancient Greeks had inequalities, and they justified those inequalities, saying that women and slaves are not identical to free men, and so don't deserve to be treated equally, even though they espoused equality, the idea of equality. So everyone has a different idea of what equality is if you are trying to base it on an arbitrary materialistic perspective. And just having similarity of something doesn't guarantee equality. I could say that chair is equal to me in having matter, but does that mean me and the chair are equal? No. I don't make I'm very comfortable sitting, of course, but the issue of animal rights now, Andrew actually kind of preempted one point I was going to mention, and I do agree with you on this, which is if cruelty is unnecessary suffering, it's not necessary for us to even eat animals in the first place. Eating animals is really a convenience of our tastes, for example. So then, if it is allowed for that reason, unless you are vegan, of course, but my kind of argument to vegans is nature isn't vegan, so how do you justify veganity when in nature animals eat all the time? Natural law of nature doesn't care about being vegan or vegetarian unless you are of a particular species which only eats vegetables. So in that respect, if you can justify eating animals based on the fact that it's your convenience, your taste, then how much more so do you believe if you believe that you slaughter them by getting rid of all the blood out of the animal, that this is not something that can be done as well, because it's part of our belief, it's part of something that we actually believe in. Now, there is not a debate as to whether stunning or animal slaughter is more humane. And there are arguments on both sides of the fence saying that, stunning doesn't always kill the animal in the first shot. Many animals have to be shot a few times with stunning. According to Animal Aid UK, they looked at in one Somerset slaughterhouse, 12.2% of sheep had to be stunned more than once. 89.6% of pigs had to be stunned more than once, although I don't justify eating pigs, of course. But in Dorset, 12% of cows, and in Derbyshire, 2.5% of cows had to be stunned repeatedly. And now that causes pain. And there's a debate, and I'm not going to wade into a statistical and scientific debate as to whether animals feel more pain if you cut a jugular vein and wait for the blood to be drained out, and they just die from loss of blood. And also, as blood loss occurs, they have shock and they have less feeling, of course. I'm not going to have a scientific debate on this because that is still being debated by scientists, and none of us here are scientists. I don't think, anyway, on this matter, anyway. But what I will say is that if you justify that animals can be slaughtered for meat because of human convenience and taste, then how much more so would you have to also permit, morally and ethically, that animals can be slaughtered by a ritualistic method based on people's beliefs? And of course, even under the ritualistic method, it is not gratuitous. In Islam, there is many rules. I can't speak for kosher, of course, because I'm not a Jew, and they know better than I do. I haven't studied it. But at least in Islam, the animal is not meant to witness other animals being executed. They're not meant to be mistreated, beaten, or hit, as they are done in many industrial farms today in European countries and around the world. So Islam, you have to treat the animal with respect, and it's purely that the animal doesn't see the knife until it's just the ritual slaughter is about to occur. And that's it. Really, in Islam, all that's required is that the animal is not basically killed and dead while still having blood in its veins, because we view that as carrion. Basically, you're eating the carrion meat. So this is really just the rule. So on that basis, we must be then consistent. The only person that could viably argue against my position and position that you can slaughter animals for convenience and taste is a vegan. But even vegans could not justify, based on natural law, why they should be vegan, because in nature or evolution or whatever you want to call it, doesn't care about animals eating other animals. In fact, it's part of the life cycles of many animals who only eat other meat and bugs or insects and all other living things that crawl and walk the earth. So I think these are the considerations. I think we both agree that it's not necessary that we shouldn't kill animals in ways that cause them pain unnecessarily. But when you believe it's necessary, as a Muslim, for example, or as a Jew, then you have a better reason than someone who wants to kill an animal purely because they like their McDonald's burgers. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We've got 2 minutes.
The ways which animals we could limit suffering has not existed yet, because even both worlds, even religious or non-religious theologies, have never come up with except for Islam, have never come up with a certain way of killing the animal quickly to lessen its suffering and to feed us. Normally, when you see around the UK, when you hear all this stuff about animals being caged in and being really stunned, like constantly, as Abdullah just stated with his data, it should not have even come up on the topic, as like animals do not know, like we don't know how animals suffer from pain. We don't go inside their brain or stuff and just like feel every emotion they do. So by limiting pain, this is like limiting on how quickly they die. And Islam has come up with the most effective way of killing the animal quickly rather than stunning it constantly. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't have very much to say. I think I'll say 2 things. First of all, to stand up for the vegan position, though I'm not a vegan. Are you a vegan or a vegetarian?
Vegetarian.
Oh, well, you're not enough then.
Of course,
not hardcore enough. I mean, a vegan, to say that it's an argument against the vegan position, that in nature there are, human beings are not vegans, or that nature is not vegan, is not to argue against the vegan position, because the vegan position is not that they're going back to a state of nature. The vegan position is that animals suffer through the processes of meat production and meat slaughter. A vegan does not want to be a party to that suffering, does not want to be committing that suffering on other animals, and has therefore said that they will not do so, has conscientiously refused to do so. Nature's got nothing to do with this. I don't see how nature comes into these moral questions in a negative way at all. So I think that nature is a red herring in terms of animals and their suffering. I agree with Abdullah that the thing to do primarily is to find the means of animal slaughter which causes the least suffering. I disagree about the extent to which the experiments that have been conducted and the expert literature has or hasn't identified that. The Farm Animal Welfare Council in this country did say that pre-stunning of meat is the best way to guarantee a reduction in suffering. But I think I agree that neither of us are scientists on this matter, and there's very little point in getting into the technical details. However, we have at least reached some agreement, which is that the decrease in animal suffering is desirable, and we should be led by the evidence as to what really does most decrease animal suffering. However, Abdullah then went further and said that even were the amount of suffering to be greater under the methods prescribed by religion, then still it would be okay, it would be moral, to allow those religious exemptions from animal slaughter laws, because we ought to give a greater respect for religious prohibitions and rules than we do to matters of other taste, other preferences. And I can't follow him directly down that, as far as that, down that route. I think there probably are humanists who would say, yes, you're right, the religious feelings of human beings should count more than the suffering of animals, because we sort of give a greater weight to human beings in this matter than we give to animals. I am not inclined to see religious preferences as that different from other sorts of preferences, and so I think I would give them a lower weighting, and I might possibly increase the weighting that I would give to reducing animal suffering. So I would be ready to argue for the prohibiting of certain methods of animal slaughter if they were to be found to increase animal suffering, even if they were religiously required by some religions.
Thank you very much.
Well, then I think we've reached perhaps an agreement on I suppose where the basis for morality comes from. I suppose in a material perspective, human taste. In a material perspective, it's human taste. So vegans have a taste that they don't want. Their taste that they don't want to see animals suffering unnecessarily, and eating animals is unnecessary. Therefore, that it is greater suffering for the animal to basically go with your taste for burgers and see animals be slaughtered. So it's best to reduce that, and that's their taste. Other the human taste is saying, well, I do like to have a burger, so because of that, I want to follow that taste. Animals, should be slaughtered in abattoirs, and their conditions. Although we should try our best to make it as comfortable as possible, but ultimately they're going to have to endure the possibility of being stunned multiple times and being locked up in buildings and enclosures and things, as is the requirements of necessity for industrial production. But I say, of course, as a Muslim, and I don't say it's my taste, but I suppose maybe humanists would interpret it that that's my taste because I believe in God and so following that it's a taste of mine. But I say that basically that I put greater weighting on the belief that there's a certain methodology of slaughter which minimizes as much as possible the pain of the animal and the suffering of the animal, but to fulfill a particular objective, which is the evacuation of blood from the animal, so we don't eat carrion meat. That the method of slaughter is a traditional one that's been practiced for hundreds of years and so on and so forth. Now, this debate then doesn't become one of any objective argument saying that, well, I have an objective rationale which is I can demonstrate like mathematics to show that this is wrong, this is right, but rather it's just a matter of human taste, of which taste you're going to go with. And I suppose what I want to say is that I respect Andrew's right to hold his taste and hold his beliefs, but at the same time, in the UK and in Europe and so on, other people who want to use their particular taste, not Andrew, but I'm saying other people I've seen who say we must ban kosher slaughter, we must ban halal slaughter because it's not in their taste, not part of their religion. This is an imposition of their taste on other people's taste. If you don't want kosher and halal meat, don't eat kosher and halal meat, right? If you don't want to eat meat at all, then don't eat meat at all. All right. So, but really, we must be wary about imposing our taste. I'm not saying I opposition doing this. I'm just saying, in general, making comment about the current discussion of this matter in Europe at the moment, where I think in one European country they banned kosher and halal meat slaughter, which is you have no right to impose your taste, because ultimately it is just taste, which is the basis for the morality in Europe. and they shouldn't impose one taste over another when they lack the means of saying one taste is better than another.
Thank you very much for that. Can you note what you want to say? You said that. Yeah. I'm going to open you up to the audience. I'm only going to take 2 questions this time. Has anyone got any question?